For nearly a decade, Comcast has been helping students get ready. We've connected 4 million low-income students to low-cost, high-speed Xfinity internet. We're working with hundreds of school districts across the country to sponsor free internet and laptops. And parents are seeing an impact. And now we're turning 1,000 community centers into lift zones, Wi-Fi-enabled safe spaces to study, so more students can be ready for anything.
I'm trying to do some homework here.
Welcome to Principal for Almost a Day 21, presented by Comcast. Today's panel discussion theme: Transformational Leadership in the time of COVID, what does it look like now? Featuring Reynolds School District Superintendent, Dr. Danna Diaz. Multnomah County District 2 Commissioner, Susheela Jayapal. Principal of Franklin High School, Frazier. And the CEO of Metropolitan Family Service, Judy Strand. Now, here's your host, the CEO of All Hands Raised, Lavert, Roberston.
The COVID-19 crisis has highlighted the critical need both for talented leaders and for empowering those leaders and the teams around them. With public education and many adjacent sectors thrust into unforeseen difficult circumstances, many leaders have risen to the challenge, working hard to ensure their organizational missions and longer-term survival while simultaneously focusing on the immediate safety and welfare of our children and families. To further expand on today's theme, we brought together a dynamic panel of voices from Multnomah County to share their thoughts and ideas and to field your questions. With great appreciation and respect, I hand things off to the chair of the All Hands Raised Board of Directors. Please welcome Cole Mills.
You know, when I think about why I do the work I do with All Hands Raised, it comes down to one simple thing for me, and that is that we need, as a community, to give our children the best opportunity for success as they move into the world. And I think All Hands Raised does that in spades, frankly. They think about the entire child, not just what's going on in the school, but rather what's going on in their home, what's going on in their community, and really try to work with the entire community through collective impact to really give every child that best opportunity for success. I've been participating in PFAD myself. I think this is my 8th year. And what I was reflecting today on the drive over, I was thinking about that PFAD experience today. And for me, the first aha moment was, this is the longest time I had gone without being in a school. I had gone almost 2 years without being in a school and seeing what's going on in that environment. And it was just really exciting to actually be able to spend some time with some kids. I personally got to enjoy Sinton Elementary School this morning. Sinton is a K-5 school over in St. John's, and I was lucky enough to be there for Spirit Week. Today was Glitter Day, so I had the opportunity to sprinkle glitter all over the heads of many boys and girls, red or gold. And I just thought to myself, there's going to be a lot of parents tonight really angry that they have glitter all over their house because of my effort to help their Spirit Week. But in all seriousness, I did get a chance to spend some time with Miss Barry, the principal at Sinton Elementary, and it was just eye-opening to me, both the effort that school and those administrators and all the teachers are doing to provide an in-person education experience. I was really naive to what is going on in the schools right now to provide that experience, and I was absolutely humbled at the efforts that they were making. We did an earthquake drill. We checked all the students in through distance breakfast. We got hand sanitizer on every child and glitter. So, no, truly, every time I do this, I am constantly reminded of the energy and the effort that these teachers and administrators are putting forth to try to provide the best environment for our students to succeed. So, without further ado, my job today is to moderate an amazing panel of folks to help us kind of talk through transformational leadership in a time of change. So we're going to jump right in. And I'm going to start with a bit of a softball question for all of you guys. Who was your favorite K-12 teacher, and what about them make them stand out in your memory? Judy, let's start with you.
Mrs. Sullivan, second grade teacher. She was a person who saw me for who I was, and she always encouraged me to get through challenging times and never gave up when things got tough. So she gave me a lot of confidence, and I think that set me on a course that's helped me throughout my life.
How about for you, Chris?
It would be Mrs. Berger, my 8th grade U.S. history teacher. She instilled in me a love and passion of learning. appreciation of my race and culture and introduced me to one of my favorite authors and abolitionists, Frederick Douglass.
Commissioner Jayapal, who was your favorite teacher and why?
Mr. Clemson, Mr. Walter Clemson, my 8th grade math teacher. I was a very quiet student. I never put my hand up, and he came over to me one day and just said, "I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. Would you put your hand up?" Gave me a lot of confidence.
That's lovely. And Dr. Diaz, let's close our warm-up segment with your favorite teacher.
Mr. LaSalle from PS10 in the Bronx. As an English learner just arriving in New York City from Puerto Rico, he showed me how important it is to be a warm and welcoming teacher, and he inspired me to become a bilingual teacher.
Well, now that we got everybody on the panel warmed up, let's dive into today's theme. Transformational leadership in the time of COVID. What does it look like now? So during our registration, people generously submitted some very compelling questions and ideas for us to discuss. Many people asked this question in one form or another. After 18 months in relative chaos, what ways can we better support the social and emotional development of our community's youth? Let's start with you, Judy.
Well, I think in the big picture, it has a lot about aligning with resilience factors that we all need in a time of stress. And in thinking about that, you can just think about the last 18 months where basic needs became primary focus for all of us so that we were sure that our students and families had what they needed. But it really goes beyond that in terms of creating some predictability in the face of unpredictability. And really, I think role modeling that this has been tough and helping show the students how we can all cope with a variety of different skills and techniques. And I think when push comes to shove, we just need to ask, what would Mr. Rogers do?
Chris, for everyone who's led an organization through the past 18 months, Jeannie brings up something I know many of us have had to reflect upon. She asks, what is your greatest learning leading during these difficult times?
My greatest learning is that we need to give and offer ourselves space and grace as we work and lead through this difficult moment. Using this as an opportunity to pause and reflect, to think about our practices and our policies that we are putting before our students and families, and recognizing that in this moment things have changed. And as a result of that change, we need to do things differently as well.
Doug Durbin, Director of Planning and Analysis at D.A. Davidson and Company up in Seattle, says, COVID forced a discussion on what motivates and sustains, on what really matters. For each of us, it's a very personal choice. That said, leading a team now is more difficult than ever. So I have a two-parter for you, Dr. Diaz. How do you lead your team in this new world, and how do you focus your team in the face of uncertainty?
One of the most important things that we do together is that we stay grounded. We pause and we reflect. We ask each other how we're taking care of ourselves. And we ask others, how are you taking care of yourself? We also ensure that we're focused on the school board strategic plan and focusing on our goals. And so we're aligned as a district to ensure that we focus on literacy, our English learners, and our students with disabilities. So continuing to focus on equity and serving our young people and families.
Many of you mentioned the importance of community joining forces for the common good. I really like how Patty Wood at Education Northwest puts it. The education of our youth takes a collective societal effort, yet we hand the responsibility over to our schools. We're at a unique time in which we have the desire, capacity, and political will and need to come together for our youth. We need to make this collective effort work and stay. To Patty's point, Commissioner Jayapal, how can we bring the community back together to create real change?
I really love this question because to me, the single biggest learning from this pandemic is about connectedness. And it's about individual connectedness, and we saw this in concrete ways. So if one person got sick, that was a risk to everybody else, individual health connected to public health. Sure. And then we saw the connectedness between systems, that kids who weren't being fed couldn't learn well, that families who had kids at home and who needed to have frontline jobs weren't able to go to work. I mean, we saw that all of the systems are connected. And I think that that's what we focus on as we move forward, that education, as the questioner asked, cannot do it all. The school cannot do it all. And so as policymakers, as leaders, I think the way the community comes together is to remember that and to advocate, for example, not just for more resources for K-12 classrooms, but for mental health and for healthcare and for housing and for all of the things that it takes to help a child succeed in school.
Mr. Cave, the principal at Boise Elliott Humble, said, "To completely rethink education and launch a more dynamic and project-based experience that is driven by our students." Chris, what do you think we can do to empower our students to drive their school experience?
Students should be a part of their educational experience. School should not happen to students. They should be in partnership with us as educators. And so, again, as there's opportunities to get student voice, whether it's to student council, just opportunities for students to check in with staff and community, that would be greatly appreciated so that we can get their perspective on how they can learn best during these circumstances.
One question we asked PFAD participants during registration was, what do you feel is the greatest opportunity for the 2021-2022 school year? Aaron Poplick of Food Corps says, resourcing schools to be the community hubs, providers of food access, social and emotional support, family connection, and resources that COVID has proved that they are. So we know the school is the hub in the community. Judy, what are your thoughts on Aaron's idea to leverage schools as hubs for community support?
Well, you know, it's something that's at the core of the SUN system, that the Schools United Neighborhood systems that we've been using in this community for over 20 years. And I think that, along with some of the new funding that we hear is coming from the federal government, it should be providing more opportunity for us to join together community-based organizations and school districts together to create that wraparound service modality you're talking about. We already have that structure. I think what we need to do in our community is to think about that aspiration we had. Now we have 90 SUN schools. What about every school a SUN school? Is this the time to take that leap? Mm-hmm. And the other piece of it is what was mentioned earlier, is that there's some things missing between all of us together around social emotional needs that we can build together in true partnership, because we have a different connectivity now after going through this crisis. We understand now what's the most important thing to focus on together. And I think it's prime time for us to take that leap and just make absolutely sure we're partnering and on the same page and centered around the student voice that Chris just mentioned a moment ago.
Dr. Diaz, can I throw that question at you as well? As a superintendent that has, a broad range of schools from K-5 through high school and everything in between, what are your thoughts on the ideas to leverage schools as hubs for community support?
We're doing it every single day right now with COVID-19 and our vaccine initiative. We're partnering with Multnomah County Health Department with our partners to ensure that our students and families have access to the vaccine. We're already planning for vaccine opportunities for our children that are age 5 and 12. So we continue to partner. This Saturday, there's a community fest with Promise Neighborhood, and so they're gonna be at our high school. We couldn't do the work without our partners. And right now we've scheduled meetings with our partners and informed them of our strategic plan. I'm having one-on-one meetings with our CEOs and chairs of different organizations so that we can continue to work together and plan. We've also partnered with the Children's Defense Fund. We're planning summer programming for 2022, and we're gonna have Freedom Schools. It's a culturally relevant integrated reading curriculum for our students, and we're just excited not only of what's happening today, but what we can do in the future.
Live stream viewer Mary Snyder writes, what is being done for Title I schools to ensure equality in education instruction and ensuring opportunities for advancement within the system? Dr. Diaz, why don't you field this great question?
One of the things that we've done since I've been at Reynolds, and this is my 4th year, we have lowered class size for the last 3 years. So we have a staffing for equity model to ensure that we have lower class size at the elementary level, and we're very proud that we have really emphasized on that so that our students can really have one-on-one instruction, small group instructions with their teachers. We also hired more counselors and social workers with our student investment account funding, so all of our schools have more social workers and counselors. We also now hired instructional coaches with our Title I funding, and all of our Title I schools also have extra funding in their budget so that they can provide services to their students and families. So I'm very excited about the work that we're doing with not only the title funds, but also the state funds that we receive for our students and families.
Livestream viewer Stephanie has an excellent question for Commissioner Jayapal. Given that COVID heightened the health, educational, and economic inequalities for BIPOC students and their families, what can you tell us regarding how the county and you specifically pivoted to address these challenges, and what leadership transformation occurred to continue providing support to BIPOC students and their families?
Another fantastic question. You know, we saw this early on. We saw early on that BIPOC children, BIPOC families, people were going to be most affected by this crisis. And so with respect to schools in particular, we really started focusing on the needs of those families. You know, Judy has touched on the Sun School system. We pivoted that Sun School system, which previously was about after-school programming, to, for example, provide food, because we saw that children, BIPOC children in particular, were going to be food insecure. We worked with our partners to do testing at school sites. So really, I'm probably going to come back to this theme for every single question you ask me, but it's about this connectivity between our systems. And in terms of equity, of understanding that if we don't have that connectivity, it is our children of color who suffer the most. That if we don't understand that it's the whole child that we've got to address, it is our children of color, our Black and brown children, who suffer the most. And that just puts a priority on making sure that we are addressing all of those. And that's what the county tried to do.
Chris, for everyone who's led an organization through the past 18 months, I know many of us have had to reflect upon this one submitted by Livestream viewer Janine. What is your greatest learning leading during these difficult times?
It's really giving our students, our families, and our entire community an opportunity to hit the pause button, you know, to really think about and go slow with intentionality with regards to how we are going to go about our work. It's allowing individuals the opportunity to just take a breath and realize that it's more than just the educational aspect that we need to focus on with regards to our kids, but looking at them from a holistic perspective, how the socio-political climate has changed, and that as a result, we also need to change and be more reflective about how we are best going to support our students. It's a great opportunity to once again bring our students, our families, and our staff, our larger community together at that table and to talk about what steps we need to take collectively as we create and go back to building a school system that is going to best serve our students and specifically our students of most need, our traditionally underserved students.
Judy, here's one for you. Hood to Coast Relay Chief Operating Officer Dan Floyd, former board member of All Hands Raised, submitted a topic that's been exacerbated by and come to the forefront of conversation. How can we as employers, educators, and leaders better focus on the mental health of our employees and our students?
Yeah, I think this is such an important thing to think about, and I think it's something we haven't gotten right even before the pandemic, and this gives us an opportunity to look deeply at what's missing. And something I think that we have to acknowledge is that mental health services are not available for our youth, and that youth have to get those services in conditions such as emergency rooms when it's too late. And when we see a rise in youth suicide, that's something to pay attention to. I think it's true that not everybody is a mental health expert, and yet at the same time, I think we all need to increase our understanding and our learning around what are the warning signs, what kinds of things should we be paying attention to, and how do we work with families about this issue in terms of education, prevention, and when do you intervene and how. So I think building a strong mental health consultant role for all of us, all the groups that you just mentioned, is really critical, long overdue, and also tricky when it comes to the systemic aspect. So I think we need to think about mental health resource as a scarce one that we use through consultation, assessment, and targeted intervention, and I think the time is now to do that.
Commissioner Jayapal, can I ask you to piggyback on that? How can we as employers, educators, and leaders better focus on the mental health of our employees and our broader community, taking beyond students, but just broader community in general?
Yeah, thank you for asking me to piggyback, because I was just about to do that.
Good.
You know, what I think about in addition to the mental health piece that Judy was talking about, there's a cultural piece. There's a restorative practice, restorative justice piece that I think is really important. When I think about it with respect to schools, I think that we're going to see behavioral issues in students. We're going to see those behavioral issues for a long time to come. And there's a component of addressing that that's about mental health, but it seems to me there's a component of addressing it that's also about a school culture and about how adults in a school culture or in a business or at the county in a government office, how adults all relate to each other. And you know, when I think about restorative justice, restorative practice, that's what I think about, is changing a culture so that we treat each other with kindness, so that we have ways to work through difference that don't involve punishment or you know, exclusion in the school context. So that's what I've been thinking a lot about, actually, in terms of how would we infuse, let's say at the county, how would we infuse restorative practice throughout our environment, not just in schools, not just in the criminal legal system, but throughout the environment.
Thank you for that. Margie Bradway from Oregon Metro said, the pandemic may have exacerbated achievement gaps not only by leaving some students behind, but by propelling more privileged children even further ahead academically. That makes me curious. Dr. Diaz, how can we not only bounce back, but leap forward to create an equitable education system?
Well, one of the first things that's very important is that we have to understand how to work together to do anti-racism work. And how do we really focus on understanding our students' culture, their family, and knowing that they come to school to learn and they come to school with strengths and values. So that's the most important thing. The second thing is to also look at all kinds, multiple measures of data. It's very important, not just one single set of data, but look at your perceptual data. So listen to the voices of your students and your families and your staff. Looking at your formative assessment data, looking at your achievement data, student growth data, to see how we can close the opportunity gap. And again, making sure we provide not only instruction during the day, but what other extended learning opportunities, working with our partners to ensure that our students have access to extended learning opportunities so that they can continue to learn and grow. So together we can really provide the kind of learning our students want, because the school system is just a launching pad. They are going to actually create a vision for their future with the experience they have with us. And so we want to make sure they create that vision for their life and their future in our system. But we also have to remember that we've got to focus on our work as being anti-racist, because we cannot perpetuate oppression in our educational system. So together, working on that work, but then again, providing extended learning opportunities and looking at multiple measures of data to making sure that we're doing the diagnostic work that we need to do for all of our students.
It's a great opportunity. I mean, through this crisis, it created this place that we're in right now, recognizing the disparities that happen within communities where families did not have the resources to support students during this time. It's incumbent upon school districts specifically, as well as our partners, to support those needs, to fill in those gaps, whether it's providing technology in the hands of all of our students, making sure that their basic needs are met. We talked about the housing crisis. We talked about the food scarcity. Also going back to Dr. Diaz's point, really looking at it from a racialized lens. And how can we intentionally use this opportunity to think about, our most impacted individuals and put the means in place to support them and to do all we can to close that gap.
I've been thinking a lot about the school calendar, and I think about it because of the fact that we saw so concretely during the pandemic that when parents didn't have a place for their children to be, it affected their whole lives. It affected their ability to work. That was the most concrete example. And so I think of this outdated agricultural calendar where especially students of color, whose families tend to be in frontline positions because of our racist systems, that are in a bind over the summer and cobbling, they can't afford to put together the camps, they're cobbling together care. So my vote is revolutionize it by changing the calendar.
I'm bouncing around a little bit, but Dr. Diaz, just to piggyback off of what Chris said, how can schools stabilize the learning environment for BIPOC students?
It's very important that we really dig in deep. And number one, I always talk about leading with love. Students know when you love them. Students know when you care about them. Families know. The students are the most intelligent human beings in the school. And so we've got to honor that when they come into the school and into the classroom. And once they know that you love them, they will do anything for you. So I think if we lead with love and we care and we have that empathy and we understand that they're going through whatever it is that they're going through in their life, but we support them and give them the tools that they need to learn and grow, we're going to be okay.
Commissioner Jayapal, here's an interesting three-parter submitted by Patrick Burke, Associate Professor Emeritus at PSU. Part 1, how does our guiding concept of collective impact influence our response to COVID? 2, have we retained a collective identity, or have these circumstances forced a retreat into our own organizational boundaries? And finally, part 3, how do we recapture our collective impact vision?
Do I get extra time?
Yeah, you get a little bit of time for this. There's a little meat to this one.
Thank you, Pat, wherever you are. You know, I am going to sound like a broken record, but I come back to this theme of connectivity. And I actually think there are ways although there was so much isolation during this pandemic, we were all in our homes, we weren't able to see our loved ones, there was a lot of isolation. There were also ways in which it forced us to creep out of our silos. You know, when we talk about the county, we had never been in the business of food distribution. And when we started a whole new program around food distribution. I talked about our Sun School providers who started working on, they were helping families with technology. That had never been their job before. Schools were standing up testing sites and vaccine sites. Healthcare had never been their job before. So we actually, in these interesting ways, crept out of our silos. So I would actually argue that we saw the benefits of a true collective system, and our challenge as we come out of the pandemic is to not creep back in, is to hold on to what it felt like to be able to really be nimble and flexible and do what it takes to serve our kids.
All hands on deck kind of mentality.
All hands on deck.
Yeah, I like that.
People love the Oregon Southwest Washington area. The people of the region feel a connection to each other. And at Comcast, connectivity is at the core of what we do.
For years, the Hispanic community has been waiting for remote control that we can talk to in both Spanish and English. And now we have one. Muchas gracias, Comcast.
Comcast also invests in the local community in a variety of ways and is helping our neighbors fully participate in the digital economy. We take our role as a good corporate citizen seriously. Staying connected to customers and our community here in Oregon and Southwest Washington, along with continuing to transform the customer experience, is vital to the future of Comcast. At Comcast, we connect people to what matters most.
One of the founding principles of All Hands Raised is the identification of outcome targets that can be shared across school, community, and agency partners. Where do you see the most impactful areas where these regional areas should be targeted? Dr. Diaz, you want to start this one?
Yes, I would love to. You know, one of the things about education is lack of funding. And I think that we really need to consider how we fund our schools in the state of Oregon. And I think that together, our community agencies, our county agencies can work together to really lobby our legislatures, to really look at how they fund public schools. We're in East County, and we are one of the most marginalized students and families in the county, underserved, under-resourced. And I believe that together we can really leverage our collective impact by working together and working with our legislatures so that we can really fund education in a way so that our students and our families can thrive and create that vision that they want for their future. That's how I would use that collective impact.
Chris, can I ask you to piggyback on that one as a principal in the schools and, you know, seeing firsthand the needs of the students and what's going on? Like how can we, you know, share that lift, you know, across the broader community?
Absolutely. It requires all entities of society to engage in this process. From an educational perspective, how can we better align what is happening from the K-8 system and use that information to inform as our students matriculate into whatever post-secondary experience that they have. And so I think, again, how do we connect and include more voices to this conversation? And so there's a great opportunity for us to continue to go back and reconsider what policies, practices that we have, and revise those as in an effort to include more voices to the table and bring more hands to this body of work.
How can districts, community services, and government leverage investments to return our discussions and planning to the collective impact model at our core work?
Well, again, I think we have the system that we so carefully created, that All Hands Raised brought to us, and that other collective impact efforts across our community have already built. And I'm a real proponent of starting with what we know works, and then doing a learning experience together about what didn't we understand? How do we need to change that model now that we have new information? But more than that, do we really have all the information we need to inform that? Or is this a time where our families need to share with us what their core needs are? We know food was needed, but economic development, child care, health care, there are really pivotal pillars that we don't have that really support our community's success, and that ultimately supports our youth into their future. So I think that step back that Commissioner Jayapal is speaking of is a step back for all of us that have been involved in collective impact efforts to say, what do we get right and what do we still need to build? And until we figure that out, we may continue on a direction that isn't the one that's the right one to go.
We often hear about the need to not return to normal. Can you share some strategies you are using at the county level to ensure that we take advantage of this moment to disrupt our systems and innovate ultimately?
I go back to what I said about it's almost as if we need a poster or a sign or something that reminds us everything that we changed. So that's one of the strategies I personally use. It's not necessarily a county level strategy, but is to, when my little team is stuck, when we're feeling stuck with something, when we are tempted to go back to an old way of doing things, to say, what did we change in the last 18 months? What were we successful at changing, and how did we manage to do that? And then try to learn the lesson, take the lessons from that and apply it to whatever the new problem is.
I'm going to open this one up to the whole group and let somebody grab it. We're in the midst of a massive cultural divide, and unfortunately, our political leaders aren't always demonstrating the potential for good that we can all aspire to. What one or two things can our political leaders do to model a brighter future for our youth? Commissioner Jayapal,
I think as a political leader, I need to hear from everybody else.
Fair point. Perfect. Anybody else want to grab that one?
Our students are also leaders, right? And they experienced this pandemic from a perspective that we as adults did not. And so how do we give them agency in terms of their own education, in terms of their future, as opposed to dictate what the outcome should be? And so again, while we say that there was this loss of education during this pandemic, I refute that and say that there was actually a lot of learning that our students experienced. They grew a lot. And so how can we as a system learn from their experiences, whether they were in their visual platform, or if they, whatever other way that they had it, but use that experience that they had to further inform this vision that we have collectively?
I will always go back to making sure that, again, what Chris said, making sure you put your students in the front, make sure you fund education to a high level so that then the students can have the opportunities that they need. And then again, making sure that you also hold each other accountable as political leaders, because racism is alive and well in all of our institutions. We can't deny it. It is in our faith communities. It is in our grocery store. It's in the dental clinic. And so how do we really have a conversation to disrupt that behavior when we see it in a way that's healthy, so that we can really try to ensure that our students don't experience as much microaggressions and biases when they are actually going through our systems. So I think that's what I would ask our political leaders. How do we have conversations, healthy conversations, to disrupt the systems of oppression and racism that happens in our society?
Thank you for that. Commissioner Jayapal, your revolutionary education idea got a follow-up question on the live stream. So this is for you. What are the major barriers you see in moving to a year-round school model, and how do we work to overcome them?
Great question, and I would love to hear what some of my educator colleagues think about this. You know, I think inertia is one. We have set up a whole bunch of systems around this calendar, and at this point, the calendar benefits some adults potentially, and so being willing to shift that, I imagine there are all kinds of logistical challenges to moving to a year-round system. I imagine there are a very complicated labor conversation that needs to happen in order to move to a real, year-round system. How do we work to overcome them? Chris and all of my colleagues have said, put the child at the center. If we mean that we're going to put the child at the center, put the child at the center, and let's come together and figure out how to overcome those barriers.
Before we wrap up our conversation, I have one final question. What's the greatest opportunity for our community in this moment?
Really to remember that urgency, to remember the urgency, to remember the deep, deep divides that we saw, to remember what we saw of injustice and equity in a really concrete way, and to not let go of the urgency to address those issues.
Chris, how about for you?
To not rush back to the way things were, to use this as an opportunity to center the voices and experiences of those that did not have a seat at the table, to create inclusive environments for others so that we collectively can get through this situation together.
Dr. Diaz, what do you think is the greatest opportunity for our community in the moment?
Learn from what we're going through, understand that we're going to have challenges that we are not expecting, and continue to love one another while we're learning together how to live and work when the challenges come to us. And so we did not know we were going to have a staffing shortage. We did not know that we were going to have supplies that were not going to be delivered on time. And so how do we work together and love one another while we're living in this new environment that we're in?
We can aspire higher than we have before, and that in thinking about that, I think about how really good teachers look at the true wisdom of each child, and they bring a mentoring spirit to what they do. And I kind of think we have to mentor each other. All of us have our own unique gifts, fields, talents, experiences, the lived experiences that we just have been thinking about, the cultural diversity, the disparities. There's so much swirling around here, but if we honor each other with grace, we may create something even better.
I'm so grateful for all of your guys' time and to come and share your ideas with us. But let's give a big round of applause to our incredible panelists.
Thank you, Comcast, and thank you, Kaiser Permanente, for your continuous support of this event. We couldn't do this critical work without you. And to everyone who participated or is watching today, we hope to see you next year at PFAD22, and have a wonderful afternoon. See you all next year.